Hello, interwebs. Ooh, the mic will not stay down. Bad mic. Stay. Good boy, girl. Yeah, it's a boy. Anyways, starting off strong. Hello, interwebs. Today, we're going to be doing another book review because I have finally done what all of you have been asking me to do for forever and finally read some Terry Pratchett. Yes, so many of you out there in my audience, live streams, comments, all that stuff, have been asking me to read Terry Pratchett, knowing that I would absolutely love him. And to be honest, I've known that I've wanted to read Terry Pratchett for a very long time. He seems like right up my alley, the sort of irreverent, weird humor. Also, just seems like just a very strange guy, very clever guy. I've seen some Discworld, like TV shows and stuff like that, and I've always enjoyed the humor of them. And so I'm honestly surprised that I've never gotten around to reading Terry Pratchett in my numerous readings. It's just something that's like, everyone has those like weird blind spots in their life when they're reading, and Terry Pratchett was just one of mine. But after all of your recommendations and after these sort of recent controversy might be the wrong word, but for those of you who don't know, TERFs, Trans-Exclusion Radical Feminists, the transphobic hate group, people tried to claim Terry Pratchett online, saying like, well, J.K. Rowling's a TERF, and Terry Pratchett would have hated trans people too, which is obvious nonsense. Like even Neil Gaiman, who was a friend of Terry Pratchett's and constant collaborator, Terry Pratchett's own daughter, both came out on Twitter and said, nah, man, Terry Pratchett would have loved trans people, does love trans people, wrote about trans people in his work, or at least trans issues in his work, and even stated to Neil Gaiman that he was so proud that trans people read themselves into his novels. So like, nah, you can't claim Terry Pratchett, TERFs. He's one of ours. He is a phenomenal, lovely, kind person, and you don't get to claim him. So there's been some wonderful, I think Sean, the YouTuber Sean, did a wonderful sort of discussion on that situation if you're interested more in what happened there. But ultimately, hearing all of that made me be like, all right, knowing Terry Pratchett was like a kind person, a trans-affirming person, and also just knowing that he's like part of my like same sort of idea of like just weird humor in nerdy stuff, I had to read him. So I finally done it, and I've read the first ever Discworld novel that Terry Pratchett ever wrote, The Color of Magic. Now, I know the Discworld novels are sort of an interesting thing to get into with Terry Pratchett. A lot of people don't recommend reading them straight through. I was trying to look for like a reading order for Discworld, and the Discworld setting is more like a setting, and there are like sub-series within the setting, but you don't necessarily need to read them in order. You can sort of read them out of order and sort of like within the subsets and series. And so I was sort of thinking about all of this, but as someone who, like, I like reading, and one of the things that I enjoy out of reading is I like seeing the development of ideas over an author's life, like how authors built their worlds and built their ideas and built their themes. And so I like reading stuff in chronological order. So I know it probably may not be the best order to read them in your opinion, but for me, I am going to start reading the Discworld novels in order. So this might actually be a bigger project that might be coming out of this this sort of thing here, where I'm going to be starting to review all of Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels, and I'm going to be reading them in publication order. Again, I know that that's controversial. I know people may not love that. They may be like, no, you need to read Guards first, which is like the one they hear about, or the Death novels, or things like that. Totally understand. I am someone who will stick with it. Don't worry, you're not going to knock me off with like, oh, there's like a weird novel, or it doesn't match up to his later work and something like that. I like seeing this stuff. I like seeing the development ideas. But that being said, let's actually get to the review here, and let's actually get to the discussion of The Color of Magic, because this is the first Discworld novel that Terry Pratchett wrote. And if this is like, and I know this is the one that people think is his most underdeveloped work, and sort of like him just sort of figuring this out. And I can definitely see that, but I still love this novel. What is clear with this novel, The Color of Magic, is that Discworld, this novel feels more like it's just Terry Pratchett sort of writing a novel that's supposed to be a parody of different fantasy tropes and genres. Clearly at this point, Discworld was not a setting that Terry Pratchett knew that was going to be his sort of like big master work, that he was going to be returning to the Discworld setting over and over and over again. You can tell that when Terry Pratchett set out this novel, Discworld was just some sort of weird idea as part of many numerous weird ideas that were in this novel. He's just like, I'm going to create this weird setting and use it as a place to tell different little like mini vignettes and stories and tropes. Because we follow the character of Rincewind, a sort of bumbling wizard who has to help Two Flower, who is a tourist in the area. He sort of gets wrapped into helping Two Flower and helping them sort of like get out of the city and sort of show him around the area. He sort of gets drawn into this. And it just sort of becomes a way for them to sort of like bumble travel from trope to trope to trope in a really funny sort of like laugh out loud adventure. And the Discworld setting just feels more like the weird setting that this happens to take place in. And so with that being said, these tropes that Terry Pratchett is breaking down in these are absolutely hilarious. You can definitely get the sense of like absurdist writing. He has this sort of same feel to me as Douglas Adams over in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but for fantasy, where it's really it's just like his absurdist language and absurdist sort of like taking things to the extreme constantly comes up. Like you'll be following the plot of these characters, but then suddenly he'll go off on these really long tangents about like the history of this thing, and it's always very strange. So it's like you run into this group of people that are like believe in dragons so much that they're able to like think them into existence, but only in this one particular spot on the Discworld, because the membrane between magic and reality is really thin here. Or like there's other parts of the stories where the characters get like transported to our own universe on like they're falling from the sky and they get teleported to our universe and become passengers on a freighter plane, and like there's like these tangents where it's like the universe had to like bend itself to make this happen. It makes no sense. It comes out of nowhere, but it's just there to make you laugh, and just weird stuff happens out of nowhere. And very Douglas Adams-esque in that sense, but in a fantasy type of world. And I really, really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. But I could also tell that this would not be something that I would like to read over and over and over again. Like, if the Discworld novels were just this every single time, I would get a little bit bored. Because, like, reading one novel, maybe two, that's like a bunch of just fantasy tropes being made fun of, I would enjoy that, but the characters aren't really that strong. Like Raceland and Two Flower, they aren't very, very strong of a characters. They're just vehicles for these like little vignettes in this novel. But what really shines through here, and you can really tell why Terry Pratchett decided to keep going with the Discworld novels from this book, is the setting of Discworld honestly is what really, really shines here. Whenever he sits down to describe how the universe of Discworld works, like towards the end of the novel, they reach the edge of the disc, and he starts describing like the different like countries and worlds that make up the side of the disc, and how they almost fall off the side, and people trying to discover what's underneath the disc, and like worlds coming. Like the setting of Discworld is so evocative and interesting, and it really just shines through all these tropes. And you really start to understand why, while this book may have just been him just sort of being like, I'm going to make fun of fantasy tropes, why Terry Pratchett really latched on to what he had really created with Discworld in this novel and decided to be like, no, I'm gonna keep going with that, because that's the fascinating part of this. And so I could really get that sense. And that's why I really, really love reading novels in chronological order like this, because you get that sense of the author figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so I'm really excited to delve into future Discworld novels in this series, because I want to see how he develops this world of Discworld. And I know it's not going to be consistent. I know it's going to be weird and bonkers, and that sort of thing. But I am curious to see how he builds this out and how he sort of figures out this world. And I also know that there's a lot of trans themes that come up in a couple future books, and just sort of really really wonderful characters. And so I'm really excited to get into all of that stuff. So judging by this first book, while it is definitely clearly an early novel, it is definitely something that was not intended to be part of a larger series. You really start to get the idea of where Terry Pratchett started to develop his ideas with this novel. So, Color of Magic was a lot of fun. I deeply enjoyed it. It was a very good time. Not something I would want to read many books of, but knowing that this was sort of the starting place for Discworld, I'm very excited to see where this goes. So that's my thought on the very first Discworld novel by Terry Pratchett. What do you think? Are you excited for me to go on this journey to read more Terry Pratchett? Like I said, I'm going to be trying to review every single Terry Pratchett book that I read on this channel. We'll see if that actually sticks out, depending on scheduling and stuff and how long it takes me to read stuff. But I will get through this stuff. It might be a several years long project that I have ahead of me, but I'm excited to get into it. So yeah, excited to start this journey with all of you, and I look forward to it, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.